Kia ora koutou, nau mai haere mai, ki tēnei o te taoka me kaitahu. Ko wai au, ko kati hui kai, kati rakuhu, kati mākui, kati whēki ka hapu. Ka uri nei e o tautahi me te pātako rā kai hautu au. Ko Stacey te Pohue Rose tōku ikua. Kia ora, my name is Stacey te Pohue Rose. I am a trustee for the Blue Cradle Foundation. And also, I'm not mana whenua to here, however, I am of Kaitahu Kati Mamui e Waitaha, and so whakapapa to the beautiful Ōtautahi Christchurch and Banks Peninsula, where I get the privilege of catching some very nice large crayfish every once in a while, which is always a delight. So today, just want to explain a little bit behind who we are as Blue Cradle before I hand over to Michelle to kōrero a wee bit around the expedition that we did. The Fiordland expedition, Blue Cradle, we are a charitable trust that works in the marine conservation and education space, so looking at how we can educate our next generations on what is important around protecting our marine environments, but also looking at how we can develop the future leaders of the marine conservation space as well. So we have plenty of different kaupapa going on, but one of the biggest ones that we had was the Fiordland expedition back in 2021. We also had an expedition up in Northland as well, but our Fiordland expedition happened in October 2021 in conjunction with Corfrawn and ESR as well, pardon me. And so we were really excited for what we got up to there. There was a couple of, obviously with COVID, things really did kind of take a bit of a halt, and there was a real big education part of it that we as Blue Cradle were really keen to kind of get out there and get the analogies out there, teaching our young people about what being in this space is like and what's actually happening out in the fjords. But due to COVID, that wasn't able to happen. However, we still continue to fight in that space. And we just go from there. The other thing that we're doing as well is we're looking at the OECMs as well, and working with mana whenua, particularly here in Aotearoa, but also looking into the Pacific space as well, around how we can use more Indigenous ways of working, more mātauraka Māori, to be able to develop stronger protection mechanisms for our taoka, that we use, whether it be for kaimoana, or in other cases, whether it be for the likes of our whakāroi, or our carvings, or for anything in that way, shape or form, or even for our takihaka. And I can speak from it, just want to acknowledge, obviously, before I hand over to Michelle, Bubba Thompson, but also acknowledging the recent passing of Charlie Crofts, as well, who was the kai whakahaere, or the chair of Te Runanga o Naitahu, when we signed our settlement, and was quite a big aspect in this space as well for a wee while, until he got a wee bit too old, and then retired to Ōtautahi. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Michelle to go through some of the stuff we did during the expedition.
So yeah, thank you everyone for sticking around till the end, and thank you Stacey for introducing the cruise a little bit. My name is Michelle Scriver, and I'm from the Cawthron Institute, and today I'm going to be talking about the Fiordland cruise that we took part in October 2021, and this was really a collaborative effort. So we had a bunch of scientists from different groups. We had some individuals looking at marine plastic pollution, but what I'm going to talk about today is marine biosecurity, and in particular, what the Marine Biosecurity Toolbox, which is part of the Cawthron Institute, is doing around creating new tools so that we can detect and manage our marine spaces from these marine pests. So unfortunately, I didn't get to go on the cruise, but a lot of my colleagues did, and so they spent 6 beautiful days going around the sounds and collecting samples, and they were fortunate enough to spend this time on this lovely ship here. So yeah, they had a great time, and they set off in October and set around 3 different sounds. And so I want to kind of introduce the idea of biosecurity. So I think when we think of biosecurity in New Zealand, a lot of times we're thinking perhaps of airports. So when you come through the airport, you have to declare things like food or make sure there's no soil on any of your shoes or equipment. And that's really to protect our environment here in New Zealand. So we don't want any organisms that might come through and negatively impact our environment. And so beyond just what you see at an airport, this can also happen within our oceans. So in our oceans, we can have marine pests, much like on land where you can have possum and rats. You can have marine pests that can come through and damage your unique marine environment. So these usually come on ships through biofouling or through their blasted water. And really, the difficult part about an ocean is it's really vast, and it's really hard to monitor this and try to protect it from marine invasive species. So with the Marine Biosecurity Toolbox, we've started exploring molecular techniques. So we've used what we like to call environmental DNA or eDNA, and it's a field that's really exploded in the last 10 years. And this is a concept that every living thing leaves behind traces of DNA within the environment. So think about, for example, a criminal at a crime scene. They'll leave behind DNA or a fingerprint. And so we can apply that same concept to understanding which organisms are within the environment. So we can collect a water sample, take out the DNA, and figure out who's been there. And so this is the approach we took to understanding biodiversity within Fiordland, so figuring out who's there, but also as a technique to look for marine pest species. So we can start to look for these species and understand if they're present or not. And then, as I mentioned, we can do biodiversity screening. And what's really cool about DNA is you can go from a dolphin to algae, and you can really get that whole wheel of life and really understand what's going on in your environment. So the first step is sample collection. And so at Cawthorn, we've put a big push on designing tools that are really effective at collecting big amounts of water, because you really need large sums of water to effectively represent this vast environment. And we also want to make sure they're user-friendly. So we want to create tools that citizens and end users can use themselves. So we've created things like the speeding cruise net, which can go behind your boat and will filter large sums of water onto filter paper. And there's also pumps that have been designed specifically for eDNA. And so what happens is we get this large amount of water and we put it through a filter, and that really concentrates your sample. And then from there, you can extract the DNA from this filter. And part of this expedition was to look at point-of-need tools that we've created. So the idea that we can do this in the field. So we don't need to take it back to the lab. We can actually, and these are taken from the boat. So right on the boat, you can extract the DNA and use these tools so you can get a rapid assessment of your environment. And then you can start to analyze it. So those samples there in the previous photo, we're looking at how you extract DNA, but now we can also use these new technologies to assess it right in the field. So we can use what we like to call qualitative qPCR, or a qPCR, and it's kind of similar when they did all the COVID tests and you get a qPCR. So instead of looking for COVID, though, we can design it for particular pest species, or we can use next generation sequencing, and that looks at everything. And so just to give you a quick overview of what that looks like. So you get your DNA, you sequence it. And so then you get a bunch of sequences with all these unique codes. And essentially what you do is you take that code and you align it to a database. And now we know sequence 1 is species 1, sequence 2 is species 2. And then what's really cool is at Cawthorn, we've also created apps. So now you can take this same data and use it for apps that screen directly for invasive species. So it's doing the same thing, taking your sequencing or your sequence data and looking to see if it matches any invasive species. And so just a quick overview of some of the species we found. So we looked at general eukaryotes, and we found a whole bunch. We found bivalves and worms and algae. And then we can also start to look at particular organism classes like fish, and we can start to see all the families of fish. And then excitedly, we can also look at mammals, so we can find things like dolphins and seals. But what's also cool is you can start to understand the terrestrial space, and you can also find things like deer and possum that have come through the rivers into the Fiordlands. So you not only understand what's going on within the water and the sounds, but what's going around the surrounding environment. And then for pest species, this is what the tool looks like. So you can take that data and you can start to run it through the data screening. So this video just goes through it. So it's really simple. You click on that, you drag over that FASTQ file, and it will start to process it and screen for invasive species. And then if there's any detections, they come up here, and it tells you a bit about the species, what sequences matches it, and it really gives you that chance to understand your data a little bit more and validate it. And then the last cool thing about the website is it also has this mapping tool, so you can explore what previous detections have occurred. So you can look at the map and see, okay, up here they've had a Sabella detection. You can figure out more about the organism. You can look at the report to figure out who looked at it. And you can also start filtering for particular pest species to really understand its distribution within New Zealand. And so to wrap up, I just want to reiterate the idea of education and outreach. So we do a lot of that with the Marine Biosecurity Toolbox, introducing these tools and helping end users understand how to use them. So we've done this in various formats, from workshops to school outreaches to maritime festivals. This video here is a citizen science project, and it just shows some of those tools in action. For example, the speeding cruise net out the back. And this was done with a group of high schoolers. So some really cool applications and technology out there. And so this is just some photos from the event. And I think we've all showcased here today how important these natural environments are, not only for biodiversity, but also for our own enjoyment. The fact that we can go out there and cherish and enjoy these natural environments. So I want to thank all the researchers for the effort and their time in trying to preserve this. And then, of course, the program wouldn't exist with all these great collaborators from across New Zealand and Australia. So I recommend, if you're interested in this program, to check out the website. And also Blue Cradle created a fabulous video about the expedition, which I also encourage you to look up. But yeah, thank you.